Well, it's Mental Health Week coming up this week, and in the spirit of wanting to be real and to allow a space within our community to chat about these kind of things, I have Derek and Rachel with us. And so I'm just going to ask them a couple of questions about their story and about what God's been doing in their life through some of the challenges that they've had. So Rachel, tell us about your journey with mental health.
So my mental health journey started when I was little, and I've always struggled with anxiety for my whole life. But it wasn't until college that it came to a head for me. And at that time, I saw a counselor, and that's when I started on medication just to help lower the bar that I needed to climb over to take care of my anxiety at that time. And then the past 3 years have been particularly challenging for me. I'm not really sure why it happened. This is often a question that I'm asked is like, well, did something happen that made your anxiety flare up at that time? Nope, it just happens sometimes, and I can't explain why. And so my journey over the last 3 years has been one where I started from a place of wanting to root the anxiety out of my life. And over the last 3 years have moved to a place of learning to see that my anxiety is not the enemy, that my anxiety has positive things to communicate to me, that it's trying to keep me safe, and that it's telling me some things that are really important about what's going on inside of me emotionally. So I've moved from a place of wanting to destroy it to learning to love it and learning to care for the parts of it also that make it hard for me to function, so that I can live with my anxiety and love it and learn how to thrive with it.
Derek, how about yourself? Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so mine's somewhat similar. My mental health journey started when I was 3 years old. I was diagnosed with leukemia. And from there on out until I was about 9, I was in and out of the hospital, went through chemo, radiation, the works. And when I was cured, my family, we've always grown up in the church, or I grew up in the church, and everyone was like, oh, you're so special. You're a miracle baby. God's gonna have great plans for you.
Right.
And I really, throughout my adolescence and high school and even into college, just felt like an outcast. I just felt like there was this weight that I had to be the best Christian I could be, because I had to make sure that God didn't make a mistake in keeping me alive. And so that weight eventually led to me living for years with undiagnosed depression, pretty severe depression. And then I eventually went on medication, and that's when things clicked and changed. I've been on meds for the past 3 to, I think, 4 years now. And then I was living in Chattanooga, Tennessee at the time, and was a part of a really great church that I kind of think of it as my rehab point of my life. And I'm constantly fighting the feeling of shame and guilt. But I realized that, like, my depression is not a nightmare to be conquered or to be woken up from. It's just learning how to manage it better. And being at St. Peter's and being in Vancouver with my wife and eventually our son, just shows me that God's grace was there all along.
Thanks for sharing. Hear some of the same themes coming across about accepting some of what's going on, not running away from it, but learning to deal with it and handle it. Tell us then, Rachel, where has Jesus been in this journey? What's faith looked like in this journey?
Yeah, faith has been hard sometimes because you hear, don't be anxious about anything. And as someone who lives with a chronic anxiety disorder, what does it look like to read that and to be told that and to wish that I could and to be unable to do that? So I think for me, I get kind of feisty when people tell me, God has a plan, or don't be anxious about anything. But there are a lot of problems in the world. And also, God had a plan, and his plan was for Jesus to die, and I would rather not. Thank you. So I get feisty, I think, about simple answers with my mental health. But what I have found most life-giving in the midst of my mental health challenges is that God is with me, is that presence is what matters most. And what has mattered most from friends and family and from the church community, from the people of God all together, has been people who are present with me. Presence in prayer, I always tell my mom, is what I need the most when she would really like to fix things for me or help me feel better. No one, nothing but the Spirit of God can help me feel better. But presence has been what matters most, and that God is present with me, even in my lowest moments, even at the times when I haven't been able to get out of bed, when I can barely function, that he's with me, and then clinging on to the knowledge that I will feel better eventually. I don't know when. For me, it's usually a couple of days, maybe a week, and then I climb up out of it. But presence has been the most important thing for me.
Okay. So presence is a big thing, and prayer is helpful. Thank you. Derek, tell us about how faith has looked like on your journey.
Faith has been an interesting journey. It's so hard to put my finger on. Like in depression, it was almost as if my faith was never really gone. It took different forms over time, and that's God's grace. And like through some of the stuff that I've been through, church trauma, personal trauma, all of that, like it's God's grace that I didn't run away from the church. And it's by God's grace that I'm leading worship for a church now. And like, I was reminded this morning as we sang Amazing Grace, that line, through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Twas grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. That's like the crux of my faith, at least. I know that God never left, no matter how hard I pushed him, no matter how angry I got with him. There was something down deep that stayed, and I can see that now as God's grace. So I feel like there's this link between grace and faith. That Jesus will be your faith when you just can't do it anymore.
Great. So thanks for sharing, Derek. Appreciate it, and to you as well, Rachel, and the importance of presence, of a God who doesn't give up, who's with you through thick and thin, leads you home. It's very powerful, and hope it encourages those who are listening in to realise that we can kind of name these things, we can bring these things into the light, that even staff members at church have struggles with this, and so we don't need to hide as a community. We can bring these things forward together. So I hope you're able to do that as well.